Good. Thank you very much for coming, everyone. And I just want to make sure, firstly, can you hear me?
Yes.
If for some reason I start to speak too slowly, too softly, and you can't hear me, go like this, and I'll speak up. If, on the other hand, sometimes I get very excited and I start talking really fast and I jump over my words, and if you want me to slow down, go like this. All right? Good? All right, let's talk about cameos. Usually, when I say cameo to someone, they think of something like this, right? And if you were to look for a definition, you'd find many online. There are some that are very, very specific, some that are much broader. But basically, it's a carving in positive relief. What does that mean? Well, if you take your cameo and you turn it sideways and you look at it sideways, you'll see that the carving rises above the base. That's your positive relief. Negative relief intaglios are carved into the stone, so totally flat. I'm not talking about those today. Different animals. Okay, so a carving in positive relief, usually from a single block of material, which is usually a gem type of material. Agate, coral, ivory, shell. And it usually has 2 layers of contrasting color, dark and light. And it's a woman in profile. That's it. That's this presentation. No. There's more. Cameos, actually, they don't have to be carved. They can be molded because they can be made out of so many different materials that some materials you can't carve, at least not easily. Things like glass, plastics, gutta percha, vulcanite. You'll get to know what those are eventually. Porcelain, ceramics. So they're molded. They can also be assembled. You get the base made separately from the motif, and then they're glued or cemented on or sometimes screwed on, and you have a cameo. And right at this point, the people say, the purists say, but those are fake, imitation. Well, they're your budget cameos. They're certainly not a high value. They're collectible in some instances, but they're not like the hand-carved shell or hard stone cameos, but they're cameos. My first cameo was an Avon cameo, a little plastic thing. Loved it. I don't know where it is now. So they can be assembled. They can be monochrome. That means just one color. They don't have to have 2 different colors. If they're made out of turquoise, coral, ivory, those are all monochromatic. On the other hand, you can have cameos that have more than 2 different layers and more than 2 different colors, 3, 4, 5, 6, depending on the material that they're working with. And lastly, it's only women? No, it can be anything. In fact, before the 1800s, there were more men represented on cameos than there were women. But you can have full-length figures, you can have nature scenes, mythological scenes, you can have pets, you can have UFOs, you can whatever you want can be on a cameo. So let's do a little history. How long have they been around? Show of hands. Who thinks they've been around for about 250 years? All right. 600 years? All right. 1,200 years? All right. 2,300 years? Anybody for the last option? Not that long. But in fact, cameos have been around since the Roman time. There are some that have been dated to about 300 BCE. And since then, they've been in and out of fashion. Especially popular during the Renaissance and during the 17 and 1800s. In the 1800s, they were the most popular thing, that you had to have a cameo. Now, since that time, of course, they've been used as jewelry, but they've also been used for decoration in the home. They've been used as amulets and talismans. And I had to look it up to see what the difference was because I thought they were both the same. But amulets protect you from bad things like death. Talismans, on the other hand, are good luck charms. They bring you good things. So it's a good thing to have one of each. They could be used as a show of loyalty to your ruler. They could be used as a symbol of your religion. The Madonna was very popular in the 1800s. They were sometimes used as badges on soldiers' dress uniforms, on the helmet, on the hilt of the sword, on the breastplate. Napoleon was a big, big fan. His coronation crown actually had cameos in it. I don't have a picture of it, unfortunately, but, you know, diamonds and sapphires and rubies, cameos. They weren't very nice, but anyway, they were cameos. But he was such a fan that he actually founded a gem engraving school in Paris in 1805. And he had furniture that was inlaid with cameos. His house, I mean, how cool is that? Now, of course, as jewelry, women wore them everywhere that they could. They would have sometimes tiaras, earrings, necklaces, pendants, brooches, bracelets, rings, what have you, belt buckles on their shoes sometimes. But men also wore them. They wore them as rings, cufflinks, lapel pins on their fobs. So they were not just for women and not just for jewelry. Also, they were very popular as a status symbol. So back in the 1800s, 1800s, the wealthier Englishmen, some British of course, and sometimes women, but usually the young men, when they were done their formal education, they would get a guide or a tutor, or sometimes a parent, and they would go on the grand tour. They would travel throughout Europe and then further their education that way. And they would go to Germany, they would go to Italy. Italy was very popular, and they would get a cameo or 2 or 10, bring it home, and then they would show their friends, "This is my cameo," which meant I went on the grand tour, which meant I'm rich. Because you had to be rich, because these tours, they weren't your 20 days in 20 countries. They sometimes lasted months, sometimes years. So you kind of had to have the money. The popular motifs. As I mentioned, mythological scenes were very popular, as well as Greek and Roman gods and goddesses. We'll see some of those a little bit later. But here we've got this guy, Apollo, in his chariot, and he's preceded here by Aurora, goddess of the dawn. And this little guy up here, he is the genius of light. Now, genii were these protective spirits that had a job to do. They were always represented as cherubs with wings, and then this little guy, his job is to carry the torch, the light. And then these women here, all elegantly dressed women that are cavorting along the chariot like Apollo, they are called the hours or the seasons, and they represent the passage of time. So this whole cameo basically is, good morning, it's a new day, woohoo! Now this is a modern reproduction of more antique cameos, which were then reproductions of a fresco in the ceiling of one of the Roman palaces. And the fresco was painted in 1613 by Guido Reni. So it's quite a popular motif. And this is a modern, because if you see this border around here, that's a modern thing. Older cameos, antique cameos, they didn't really do borders that much. So that's one clue. And we have the 3 graces. They were the daughters of Zeus, goddesses. They could bestow on humanity gifts of beauty, youth, elegance, and mirth. Well, I tell you, when they got to my house, I think they were fresh out of just about everything. I think I got mirth. I'm good with mirth, but, you know, I could have used the others. But we see the full-length figures of the 3 women. And they look like they're cavorting and having fun. And at the end, if you want to see it closely, it's on on Fiona, the mannequin. I called her Fiona. Other popular motifs of the Madonna in the 1800s. Kings, queens, important people of the day. Apparently Shakespeare had quite a few cameos done of him. Then we have Rebecca by the well. And there she is here. This is a biblical reference. Rebecca, I believe, was the wife of one of Abraham's sons. And she is represented usually as a standing woman, sometimes seated, but usually standing, and usually by a well or some building or a bridge. So we can see some water. There's a bridge here, and there's a building here which could house a well inside. This was very popular between 1860 and 1900. So if you ever have a cameo with that motif, you know that that's probably when it dates from. And I saw a particularly really nice one just earlier today. Maybe Sandra will show it to you. Personal portraits were very popular. You'd have to sit a long time, though. No, you wouldn't. And then during the 19th century, so the 1800s, they became very, very popular. Like I mentioned before, they were the thing to have. And so they went into mass production. And that's when they started turning them out really quickly. And the anonymous woman in profile became the prevalent motif. Now, throughout the ages, or throughout the years, the profiles have changed. And this is a very good way on how we can date when a cameo was carved. About 1800 and before, they were very Roman looking. Strong Roman nose, Roman hair, very sedate hair. Not a lot, like a little bit of hair here, a little bun and a few tendrils. And then kind of a Roman toga. So very Romanesque. Throughout the first half of the 1800s, the noses started getting a little bit more upturned, a little upside to them. The hair became a little bit more elaborate, and for some reason the women started getting a little chunkier, jowly, matronly. I don't know why, but now this lady has wings in her hair. They're butterfly wings, and that identifies her as the goddess Psyche, the wife of Eros, or Cupid. And then, as time went on, we got to the 1900s. The hair has got quite frou-frou-y. The little nose, a bit more upturned, a little bit more jowlier, a little bit lower cleavage, and then stuff started appearing on the shoulders. And so, looking at the visage, or the profile of the cameo can tell you a lot about the time that it was made. Now, of course, nobody says that a carver today can't decide to carve something like this. They can. But somebody in 1800 will never have carved something like that, because that wasn't a thing. It's like painting the Mona Lisa in a miniskirt. No. Right. Question. Can jewelry wear jewelry? Yes? No? Dumb question? Well, the end of the 1800s, we saw the appearance of what they call the habillé cameos. And those are cameos where the woman's actually wearing jewelry, and usually there's encrusted little diamonds or gemstones. And they're wearing jewelry. They look something like this. Oh. So you can see she's got a little diamond necklace here. Now look at her face. Look how tiny her face is. And her whole face, actually, compared to the rest of her. So this is definitely post-1900, probably 1940, 1930, 1940. Now, by that time, the girls, or the ladies on the cameos, were often referred to as Gibson girls. Because that was, at the time, that was the epitome of beauty. Very tiny features and very big, poofy hair. Gibson, why? Because there was a gentleman called Charles Dana Gibson. He was a pen and ink artist, and that's what he painted. All these women, and they called them Gibson girls. Yes.
That necklace and pendant, that is attached to it.
It is attached, and sometimes the ladies would have diamonds in their hair if they had a tiara, or in their ears for earrings. Now, something very horrifying has been happening, because sometimes people would go after the diamonds and take them out of the cameos and then just leave the cameos, and now you've got these women with holes in their chests and their heads. It's very horrifying. Then in the 1960s, we get Girl with the Ponytail. She's everywhere now. Very, very modern, usually plastic. Sometimes carved, but usually plastic. And she's still around today. Sometimes you'll see representations that are a lot finer. Sometimes it's a lot more crude, depending on the quality of the molding. Right, materials. What are these things made out of? Well, there's a whole list, and more. Basically, if you can mold it, if you can carve it, you can make a cameo out of it. I mean, you could get Sculpey polymer clay and make a cameo out of that if you wanted. Again, the value is vastly different between one material to another. But I'm going to talk about just a few of them, because otherwise we'd be here all day or all night. Hard stone. All right, what is hard stone? It's agate. Ooh, what is agate? Agate is a type of quartz. Damn it, Marie, what is quartz? Well, quartz is very, very plentiful. And you probably know it as the prismatic quartz, where you see the big crystals of chunks, these stones with the round stones that have been opened, and inside there's a cavity and there's big crystals growing. That's your prismatic quartz. And you get amethyst if it's purple, citrine if it's yellow, etc. But sometimes quartz can be microcrystalline, so the crystals are so small you can't see them, and they look solid. And this is what you have here. So you've got the crystals in here, and then on the edge you've got almost what looks like a solid layer. And here, that doesn't show very well, but here also we see different layers. Now agate is called, it's also always banded in different colors. And if you go in a souvenir shop and sometimes you see slices of agate and they're blue and they're purple, they're dyed. The natural colors are usually your gray, your white, your reddish brown, orangey sometimes. Onyx, some people think onyx is a black stone, but technically onyx is the layer of black and white, alternating straight layers of black and white. And then if you have sardonyx, it's brown and white. Okay, so we've got this hard stone, and what do they do? Well, they get a sample where the layers are straight. And they get the block. You've got your black on the bottom, you got your white on the top, and then you carve out the white to get the motif that you want. And then around the edges, you carve out all the white all off, and then you get something like this, or like this, which is I'm wearing. Now sometimes you can have more than 2 layers. So if you had, on top of the white, if you had a red layer, you could leave some of it and put some red accents in her hair. And sometimes, you know, even more layers. And that just depends on the ingenuity of the craftsman. Now, this is agate, of course, and it's translucent. What it means is that when you look at it through the light, you see through it. It's not clear like glass, but you can see, if you move your fingers behind it, you'll see the movement. Now you're going, but it's not black. Why is it not black on the lit picture here? And that's because agate, black agate is very uncommon. It's usually dyed. This one is not. So if you look at this closely, and you can look at it afterwards on me, it's kind of a dark gray. Okay. Now, agate cameos usually came from what is now Germany. There was a mine in Idar Oberstein. There were 2 villages that kind of merged. That's where the mine was, and therefore that's where the workshops were. And that mine has been around for at least since 1497. We have records of it being a working mine then, but it's been thought that it's been around since the Roman times. Unfortunately, about 1800, it got depleted. The Napoleonic Wars didn't do it any favor either. So a lot of the craftsmen left. Some went to Brazil, found another mine, and started exporting agate back to Germany. And that started in 1834 and is still going on today. Now agate is very hard, hence the name hard stone. It is very difficult to carve, but it's very durable. So that's one good thing. But it's also very heavy. So if you have a cameo like this, it's kind of heavy. I'm lucky I have enough fabric to hold it up, but if you have a very thin sweater or very thin blouse, you'll find that it pulls down on it. On the other hand, shell, as we see in a little while, is a lot lighter, much easier to wear. All right, here's just a few more hard stone cameos. So we've got Kevin over here. He's a helmeted soldier. He could be Atlas from the Trojan Wars. He could be Mars, the god Mars, or he could be just a soldier. So I call him Kevin. And we've got some earrings here, and you can see you've got a white layer here. You've got more like a bluey, translucent layer. I call it skim milk, because that's what kind of skim milk looks like. And then at the very bottom, there's a red layer, which you can't really see here, but on the back, you can see it's a red layer. And then there's a lady here, and then a couple of rings down here. This one is onyx, and this one is sardonyx because of the dark brown background. With hard stone, when you have it on rings, the first thing to go is the nose. Unfortunately, we always kind of whack our hands, and because the nose is usually so finely done, you'll often see some that have no nose. Unfortunately, they look like the Sphinx. No nose. Shell. Okay, how are we doing for time? Oh, not too bad. Shell. Cameos first appeared 15th to 16th century. The leading manufacturer of cameos to this day is Italy, specifically Torre del Greco, a small fishing village near Mount Vesuvius, Naples. And they've been doing shell cameos for a long time, as well as coral. We'll talk about coral too in a bit. There's different types of shells, but usually it's the helmet shell. I've got one, actually I'm going to send it around because you can have a look at it. It's helmet shell. And it doesn't really look like a helmet, but the one that's going around is a small one. They can get quite big, and I guess if they're about a foot long, it could look like it's a helmet. Anyways, there's 4 kinds. Basically, there's the bullmouth, the king, the emperor, and the horned helmet shells. And the main difference is the colors that you get. This one, we've got kind of a caramelly, orangey, browny, dark layer, and then a buff or cream lighter layer. Some of the other shells will give you a darker brown, chocolate brown, sometimes a reddish brown, and a much wider, lighter area. And we also have the queen conch shells. I don't have a picture, but you know in the movies when you see somebody blowing a conch, like whoop, whoop, okay, that's a conch shell. That will give you a cameo that has very pale pink, white to pale pink colors. Unfortunately, it's often been it's been sold as angel skin coral, which is a bit more valuable. And we have cowrie shells as well. This is a cowrie shell there. Sometimes they're very small, sometimes they're bigger. And here's one that's carved. And here's a cameo that's carved. Now, cowrie shells are great because they are the only shells that will give you a layer that's lilac in color. And with these, they often do them as reverse cameos where the background is in the lighter layer, the lighter color, and then the motif is in the darker color. All right. Now, with shells, they've got 3 layers. They've got their big, knobbly, rough outside layer, which is usually taken off. Sometimes they might leave a little bit on just for accent. But the middle layer is your light layer, and the darker layer then is underneath. And then just carve it out. It's lightweight, so you can wear larger pieces quite easily, and they're very light. They're almost always curved on the bottom. Because they come off of a curved surface, underneath is curved. And so when you're buying a cameo, look at the back. If the back is uncovered and you see this curved layer, that's an indication that it's shell. If the back is covered, could be plastic, could be a crack in it, it could be, so your index of suspicion goes up if it's covered. They are translucent, much like the agate that I showed you where you see the light through. And it's good to see because you hold them up to the light, you want to make sure they don't have any cracks in them. Sometimes they get cracks, they dry out and they crack. And you don't want to buy one that's cracked because you'll buy a cameo and then eventually you'll have 2 cameos. It's not good. It's very soft, so it's very easy to carve. They could do a lot more in mass production as shell than they could with the hardstone cameos. But because it is so soft, it gets worn down sometimes and get loss of detail, especially on rings. You get worn and then you get kind of like a ghostly image instead of the motif that was there before. Right, so here are some ladies. You can see there's a different color. There's a reddish brown, darker brown, orangey, different colors. This one here is a queen conch shell. You can see it's very white, but just slight pink on the underside here. Now,
sorry, that 1, 2, 3 at the bottom, third one over.
This one?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Is the back and the face all one piece?
Yes, they are. All of these are shell cameos, and they're all one piece. Yeah. Yeah. Now, here, this lady, she is Demeter. How do we know? It's because she's got wheat in her hair. And she is the goddess of the harvest, agriculture, fertility. So that's how she's represented. Over here we've got Athena, always represented as a warrior princess or warrior goddess. And here we've got an oddity, not really an oddity, but yeah, there's two heads. There's two people actually. This is Nyx and Eos, the goddess of day and the goddess of night. Here's Eos, the goddess of day, also called Aurora, and she's got a dove here. She's awake, as opposed to this guy, this lady here, Nyx, the goddess of the night, is sleeping. She's got a moon above her. She's got a little owl here that's hard to see, but is there. And she's got poppy pods in her hair. So all these symbols put together gives you the identification of what the lady is. Over here, these two ladies have grape leaves in their hair and grapes. This is easier to see here. It's grape leaves and some grapes. They are called Bacchantes, followers of Bacchus. Bacchus, the god of wine and revelry and party party.
And what is the red?
The red what? This?
Yeah.
This is just part of the shell, the top part of the shell, yeah. And of course we've seen her, and this is Ariadne. She's the wife of Bacchus, and she's got laurel or ivy leaves in her hair. And this is just a lady sitting there. She could be Rebecca by the well, but most likely not. She's got some doves and she's writing, so she's just sitting there. Very manly chin she has. Look at that. Yeah. One of these things is not like the others. Anybody can tell me. Has nothing to do with the color. Has nothing to do with the number of heads that they have. It's
One's pointed to the left.
Noses.
yes.
One's pointed, yeah.
She's facing left. Everybody else is facing right. Does it matter? Well, not really. But there are a lot fewer ones that are faced to the left. Why? Because most people are right-handed. Most carvers are right-handed. Much easier to carve the details of the face when it's pointing towards the hand that's working, rather than working like this. So you'll find that most of your cameos, which have faces, the carved ones, because the molded ones doesn't matter, but the carved ones, most of them are facing to the right. Now, if you're looking at eBay and you want to look for cameos and you see one rare, left-facing, one of a kind, yeah, they're not that rare. They're not that rare. But if everything else is the same, you have two that are identical, the steam is the same, identical, just one's facing left, one's facing right, the one that's facing left will be slightly more valuable. Slightly.
That third one across.
Oh, sorry, let's go back. How do I go back? Wait a minute, I can go back.
I don't need the picture. When you get the dark brown inserted in the white, does that mean there's a soft spot?
No, that's a shell.
Where is that? Which one's so?
White spot. Third one over on the left, yes. And the dark spots.
Yeah, this is just the different types of shell and the layers. Sometimes the white layer is very thin, and you have to leave some of the outer layer, otherwise you get just the darker layer on the bottom. So it's just...
So the deeper you go, the browner you get?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And here's a few more. This one is a necklace, and it's probably early 1900s. These are about 1850 earrings, and you can see, look at the nose. It's like they hit the face on the wall or something. Very, very, very Roman. Now, see, I told you could have UFOs on camera, because I have no idea what this is. Is it an angel? Is it a trumpet? Is it a flower? I don't know. To this day, I haven't been able to figure it out.
Their heads look like their heads are flat.
Yeah. Mind you, these are earrings, so they're tiny, so they're not as intricately carved as the big cameos, but... Right? And there's another one here. Right. Question. Is coral a mineral, a plant, or an animal? Okay. Or is it all three?
Oh, yeah.
Well, the part that is carved is actually the exoskeleton. And so that's the mineral part. But it's made by a plant-like animal. So They're all three. Why is it called plant-like? Well, because the coral looks like it's growing from the ground or from the rock formations, but they're actually not. They're actually single little animals. They're called polyps. Some are very small, some are a little bit bigger, and then they make this exoskeleton and use it as scaffolding to where to live. So here we've got coral, and again from Italy. Most of the more valuable coral comes from the Mediterranean, and they range in color. The coral that's used for jewelry ranges in color from a very white, pure white, very pale pink, that's your angel skin coral, to medium pink, salmon-y pink, and to a dark red. And there's some even darker than that.
Excuse me.
Yes?
If I was to make one of them,
Mm-hmm.
to start with, what does a piece of material look like?
Well, you would have to get a chunk that's probably, well, depending on the size of cameo that you want, but you'd have to one that's probably about this thick and this big around, and then you'd carve
When
it.
they bite it, does it come out like stone, or they?
This is actually calcium carbonate, so it's quite soft, but it's kind of like a very, very soft stone, almost like if you're carving ivory or bone. Are you thinking of going into the business, or I might be your customer? Now, there is coral that are other colors, like black and blue, and they're not really used for cameos. And now a lot of coral is protected because it's been overfished. So coral cameos are not as common as they used to be. Cameos from volcanoes. Yes? Did you know that? No? Right, lava. Okay, not really lava. I mean, I guess you could get a chunk of lava and carve it, but these cameos were called lava cameos. They were made out of consolidated volcanic ash called tuff. And it's mostly found, of course, around where Mount Vesuvius was. And the color ranges is quite earthy colors, kind of blah looking. There's white and red, white and black. They're the most valuable. And then in between you've got your gray, your putty color, your cream color, your ochre, reddish brown, that color.
Yeah.
But they were very popular in the Victorian era. Actually, they were really Victorian. Before the Victorian era, 1837, 1901, not so much. After that, not so much. But during the Grand Tour, and people went to Italy, they would go to Pompeii to visit the ruins, because the ruins had started to be excavated about 1748. And so that was kind of like a new thing. And if you're going to go to Pompeii, you're going to get a souvenir. And what's best to get a souvenir of what destroyed the whole city? Lava cameos. But they are very collectible, but wearable, not so much. What goes well with black? More black. So 1861, Queen Victoria became a widow. Prince Albert died. She went into mourning, and she stayed there for 40 years. And so anything that was black became fashionable, including black jewelry. So jet was one material that they used. It's a type of fossilized wood, and it's very black. I mean, you've heard jet black, right? Description. It's actually a type of coal, and if you light it, it will burn. So do not burn your jet jewelry, please. The best source is from Whitby, England, and it's been mined since Roman times. The cameos are carved, and they can be polished to a very high shine. This is a shell cameo, obviously, because it's not black, but the frame is jet. See, I don't have a jet cameo there. It's a little bit too expensive for me. But you see how shiny it can be. But sometimes they weren't shined up. They weren't polished. They were left matte. And because the rules of mourning in Victorian England were so strict, there were so many of them, depending on how close you were to the deceased and how long it had been since they died, you sometimes weren't allowed to have anything that was ever shiny at all. So they would go for the matte look of the jet. And then as time went on, then you might be allowed a little bit of shine, a little bit, maybe a little white on the collar, maybe a little gold band, something like that. But yeah, it's phenomenal, the amount of rules they had for mourning. Okay, vulcanite and ebonite, same thing. Gutta percha, they're cousins. Our friend Charles Goodyear, he of the tires, right? He figured a way to mix sulfur with rubber, and he made vulcanized rubber. And with that, he decided to make vulcanite, which is sort of the same thing but in a smaller scale. And it was a mixture that was usually black or brown, could be any color though. They could make it white to imitate ivory, red to imitate coral, but mostly black and brown. Gutta percha, same sort of thing, but it came from a resin of certain trees, and there was a rubber made from that. And they look something like this. Now, they are molded. They can be carved. And they're usually assembled. And the way to tell that if it's assembled, you turn it sideways, and then if you see a little bit of light underneath between the base and the motif, you can tell that they were separate. Or you could turn it over, and if you see some big hunking screws, you know. Now, this isn't quite black. It was black when it first started, but both gutta percha and vulcanite tend to go brown or even khaki colored as time goes on, especially with exposure to light, sunlight. So they would usually wear them in the evening only. Right. Glass imitations. Right. This one here is basically just glass called French jet. I resent that, being French Canadian. They call French anything that's imitation. Like, really? Then here we've got Kevin again. Now, if you look at Kevin and if you hold him up to the light, you'll see actually it's not black, it's a very deep red glass. Yeah. Right. Now, glass has been around for years and years, thousands of years, and was also used for cameos. Here we have just glass. This is Demeter. She's got the wheat in her hair here. But you can tell this is a big bubble, air bubble. She's got a few in her face. That's how you can tell it's glass. Still pretty though, right? Now there's a fellow in the 1700s, James Tassie. And he developed a secret formula. Not so secret because other people made it too. But he would take powdered glass, mix it with pigments, whatever color he wanted, and stick it into a mold and fire it in the kiln. And he would get something like these two here. And these were to imitate turquoise. Now they're glass, but they're very, 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 very collectible. These are not original Tassies though, because they're not signed. But he made thousands and thousands. And he made them in any color. And yeah. You didn't think about this when I said cameos, did you?
No, I didn't.
Well, Josiah Wedgwood without an E. If you buy anything that says Wedgwood and it's got an E in there, not right, not true, fake. But he developed jasperware, which was a type of pottery, really. And what he did is he took the plain pottery and then he put on top of that a very fine bisque porcelain figures and affixed them to that. So there's your cameos. And then there's the jewelry here. Now, of course, most people think Wedgwood blue, but they also came in other colors. They came in green, they came in pink, black, yellow, darker blue, and sometimes the figures were black on white background. So, but the blue was the most popular. And this is not Wedgwood, but this is another porcelain cameo that's glazed here, just this lady here. Oh, we're doing good for time. Plastics, resins, lucite, celluloid, bakelite, these are all different plastics. They are molded, they're lightweight, they're warm to the touch. Why am I saying that? Well, anything that's a stone or shell, coral, anything that's organic in nature, or not organic, but mineral in nature, is cold to the touch. You ever had a diamond ring, you put it on your cheek and it's very, very cold? It's a diamond ring. Plastic is not cold, so that's how you can tell. If you're wondering, you place it on your cheek. You can compare it to something else, which is always best, and then if there's a difference in temperature, you'll know that one is not shell. They are imitation. We've got Ponytail Girl here. Don't forget her. There's another very popular plastic lady. This one, at first glance, she doesn't look plastic. She's very intricate, very lovely, but yeah, plastic. And then this lady, she was made with powdered turquoise. When they make jewelry with turquoise, they always have some powdered ground stuff. That's the waste. You take that, powder it some more, make sure it's very, very fine, and then you mix it with resin, put in the mold, and voila! So you can do anything. Metal. Yeah. Who knew? Any type of metal. Gold, copper, silver, anything. Pinchbeck. Ever heard of pinchbeck? Not really around anymore, but before 1854, selling gold was illegal unless it was at least 18 karat, which was a little bit out of budget for a lot of people. And so Christopher Pinchbeck decided, he was a watchmaker, and he decided he was going to make an imitation gold, and so that people could afford it. He would sell it at very cheap prices, and he mixed copper and zinc together, and it really looked like gold. Unfortunately, some sellers sold Pinchbeck materials as gold, and it developed a very, very bad reputation. After that, people say, well, that's crap. That's Pinchbeck. That's crap. But anyways, here we have some metal cameos. I'm not sure what the metals are in here. These are not my pictures. They're from one of the books here. But, you know, this is about 1930s, 1940s style, a little bit earlier, Roman style, very, very modern style, a little bit scary looking. But what else can be a cameo metal? Something that you probably all have in your possession. Medals. Ever got a San Christopher medal? Coins. I mean, you don't think, oh, I'm gonna pay with cameos. Here's my cameos. But technically, really, they kind of are. So, anyways, here are the uncameos, or the weirdos, as I call them. Now this necklace, this is brass. This is the Victorians had their costume jewelry, and they often used brass. Sometimes it was gold-plated. But here, okay, we've got cameos here. But this, when you look at it closely, it's a dome of rock crystal, very smooth dome. And what they did is underneath it, they carved it, and then they painted it. So it looks like it's a carved cameo, but it's totally flat on top, totally smooth. And then we've got these, the porcelain, the painted porcelains. Again, some people are divided. Not cameos. Yes, they are. No, they're not. I'll leave it up to you. So on that note, I want to thank you very much for listening till the end. Thank you.
Looking for more great content like this? Why not check out the Oakville Historical Society's website, YouTube channel, or Facebook and Instagram pages.